There is a kind of exhaustion that is different from ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness is a simple transaction: you spend energy, you rest, you recover. It follows a logic the body understands and can prepare for. But the exhaustion that belongs to the people who carry other people, the parents, the caregivers, the ones who are the last line of standing when everyone else has sat down, that exhaustion has a different quality entirely. It lives in the bones. It lives in the particular set of the shoulders of someone who has been holding things together for a long time, who has learned to hold things together with so much consistency that the holding has become indistinguishable from who they are. People who have lived past 50 know exactly what this looks like on another person. They have seen it in mirrors and in the faces of friends. They know that it is not weakness. It is the accumulated weight of love taken seriously over a long period of time, and it is one of the most honest things a human face can wear. This is a story about a man sitting in a hospital waiting room at 11:15 on a Tuesday night, with 3 sleeping children distributed across his lap and his shoulders like the living evidence of a life fully given, and about a woman who looked at him and saw exactly what was there. It begins, as so many important things do, not with anything planned, but with a stomach bug that arrived without warning, and a pediatric emergency department, and the specific quality of a late-night waiting room that has been full of strangers long enough that it has started to feel, in its own fluorescent way, like a kind of temporary community. His name was Joel Carpenter. He was 41 years old. He had dark hair with gray beginning at the temples in the way that some people's gray comes in, not all at once, but gradually, as a kind of honest annotation of the years. He had the face of a man who smiled easily but was not smiling right now, which made the capacity for it more visible rather than less, the way you notice sunlight more clearly when clouds have been in front of it. He was wearing a denim jacket over a gray t-shirt, and his jeans had seen better days, and he had the look of a man who had gotten dressed in a hurry several hours ago and had not thought about it since, because there had been other things to think about. On his left side, pressed against his shoulder with the absolute bonelessness of a deeply sleeping 3-year-old, was his youngest. His name was Miles. He had dark curls and a small face that was, in sleep, the specific picture of innocence that small sleeping children's faces are, every worry dissolved, every expression in abeyance, just a small person breathing quietly in the complete trust that the person beside him would still be there when he woke. Miles was wearing a dinosaur shirt that was damp at the collar. It had been a long evening. In the center, her cheek on her father's knee and her legs curled up on the chair beside her, was Annalise. She was 6 years old and she had her father's dark hair and a stubbornness that Joel had spent 3 years not quite winning against and had quietly come to admire. She was wearing her pink hoodie, which she wore approximately 5 days out of 7 regardless of the weather or the occasion. She had fallen asleep approximately 40 minutes ago and had done so with the resigned practicality of a person who has determined that nothing more is going to happen tonight that requires her attention. On Joel's right, his head heavy against his father's arm with the leaning weight of a boy who was fighting sleep and losing, was Theo. He was 9 years old and he was the kind of 9-year-old who lived very close to the surface of things, who felt everything fully and immediately and who had learned, in the way that oldest children in difficult circumstances sometimes learn, to monitor the room. To watch his father's face for information. To be alert in the spaces where adults were trying to appear calm. He was almost asleep. His eyelids kept descending and then lifting again, conducting some internal negotiation about whether the situation had been sufficiently assessed to permit unconsciousness. Joel watched this and said, very quietly, "It's okay, bud. I've got it." Theo's eyelids descended. They did not come back up. Joel looked at the ceiling of the pediatric emergency waiting room, which was the pale blue of a room designed to be soothing and which was, like all rooms designed to be soothing, only somewhat successful at this. It was 11:15 on a Tuesday night. He had been here since 8:45. His name needs a context, and the context is this. Joel Carpenter had been a single father for 4 years. His wife, Dana, had not died. She had not left in cruelty. She had left in the honest, painful way that people leave when they have discovered something about themselves that cannot be accommodated within the life they built, that the person she was and the life she was living were not, in the end, the same shape, and that she had to choose between them. She had told him this with the courage it required and the grief it cost, and he had believed her, because he knew her and he could see it was true, and because the alternative was to make her stay in a life that didn't fit her, which was not something he was willing to do. She had moved to Oregon. She called every Sunday. She was a good mother in the ways available to her, present when present, consistent in the ways she had promised to be consistent. Joel had decided, in the first year, that whatever pain her leaving had caused him was not going to be handed to the children. That they would understand their mother as the person she was, not as the story of why she went. This decision cost him something. He made it anyway. He had been alone with 3 children for 4 years. He had learned, in those 4 years, things he had not known about himself. He had learned that he was more patient than he had believed. He had learned that he could function on less sleep than medical literature suggested was advisable. He had learned to braid hair, because Annalisa's hair required braiding and there was no one else to do it, and he had watched instructional videos on his phone and practiced on a willing stuffed animal until he got it right. He had learned the specific diplomacy required when 3 children of different ages and temperaments and appetites were presented with the same dinner. He had learned that love, in its practical form, was not a feeling so much as a sequence of small decisions made every day in favor of someone else's needs, and that the sequence, repeated thousands of times, became something structural, became the thing that held. He had not been on a date in 2 years. Not because he had given up on the idea. He had not given up on the idea. He thought about it sometimes in the quiet of 11 o'clock, after the children were asleep and the house had the particular stillness of a full life momentarily paused. He thought about what it would be like to sit across from someone who chose to be there. To have a conversation that moved at adult pace, about things that were not dinner logistics or school schedules or the ongoing negotiation of 3 people's emotional needs. He thought about it. And then he thought about the full picture. The 3 children. The school schedules. The Sunday calls with Dana. The reality of what any person entering his life was actually entering, which was not a simple thing and not a quiet one and not a thing you could present as anything other than what it was, a family that had been through something, held together by a man who was doing his best, and who was, most of the time, tired. He did not think that made him impossible to love. He thought it made him a lot. Her name was Claire Donahue. She was 39 years old, and she had been a pediatric nurse for 14 years, which meant she had spent 14 years in rooms like this one, rooms where children were sick or frightened and parents were frightened too, and where the job was to address the medical situation and also, always, the human one. The room, the child, the parent, all 3 required attention, and the balance between them was the art of what she did. She had come on shift at 11. She had walked through the waiting room at 11:12, heading to the desk, and she had seen him. She had seen a great many parents in waiting rooms. She had seen them in every state that stress and worry and love and exhaustion could produce in a human being, and she had learned to read them quickly and accurately because reading them was part of the job. You looked at the parent to understand the child. You looked at how they held themselves, how they held the child, whether they were managing or beginning to buckle, what kind of support the room needed to provide beyond the clinical. She looked at Joel Carpenter and she saw the following things, in approximately this order: a man with 3 sleeping children on and around him, none of whom had been moved, which meant he had not moved, which meant he had been still for the duration of their sleeping to avoid disturbing them. A face that was tired in the deep way, not panicked, not undone, just carrying a weight that was familiar enough that it had become his posture. The dinosaur shirt and the pink hoodie and the oldest boy with his head on his father's arm and the father's hand resting gently on the boy's back in the automatic, continuous way of a parent who keeps physical contact even when they are not thinking about it, because the contact itself is a kind of language. She saw a man who was, in this moment, the whole world for 3 small people, and who was doing it with the steady, quiet competence of someone who had been doing it long enough that the competence had become invisible even to himself. She stopped. She went to the desk. She came back 10 minutes later with 2 things, the file on the Carpenter children, and a cup of coffee in a paper cup that was not from the waiting room machine but from the staff room, which was better. She sat down in the chair beside him. "Joel Carpenter," she said, quietly, so as not to wake anyone. He looked at her. "That's me," he said. "I'm Claire. I'll be taking care of your kids tonight." She offered the coffee. He looked at it. "That's from the staff room," he said. "Yes. You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. He took it. He held it with both hands in the way of someone who has been cold for a while and has only just remembered it. "The little one," he said. "Miles. He's the one who was sick. The others they wouldn't stay home without me. I tried." A pause. "I don't have anyone to leave them with at this hour." "It's fine," she said. "They're not in the way." He looked at his 3 sleeping children. "They never really are," he said. In a voice that was tired and full at once. "Even when they are." She understood exactly what he meant. The next 2 hours had the particular quality of a late-night waiting room when the urgency has passed, a kind of suspended time, neither quite day nor quite night, the fluorescent light unchanging, the rhythm of the room slow and procedural. Miles was seen, assessed, given what he needed, cleared to go home in the morning. The nurse's aide checked on the older children. The situation resolved into the particular relief of a medical situation that had seemed large and turned out to be manageable, which is one of the better kinds of resolution. Claire came back to the waiting room 3 times over the course of the evening. Each time with something practical, an update on Miles, a blanket for Annalise whose feet were cold, a cup of water that Joel had not asked for but that he drank in the way of someone who had forgotten to stay hydrated for the last several hours. On the 3rd visit, around 1 in the morning, Theo and Annalise were deeply asleep and Miles had been settled in the children's observation room, and Joel was sitting in the waiting room alone, the first time he had been without at least one child in his physical vicinity for approximately 5 hours. He looked, Claire thought, like a man who was not quite sure what to do with the space. She sat down. "He's comfortable," she said. "He'll sleep till morning. You should try to sleep too." "I know," he said. "I will." He did not. He looked at the middle distance for a moment. He said, in the voice of someone who is saying something not because they intended to but because the hour is late and the guard has come down to the place where honest things come through, "I keep thinking about what it looks like from the outside. This." He gestured at the waiting room, at the general situation of a man alone in a hospital in the middle of the night with 3 sick and sleeping children. "What it looks like to anyone. What I look like." Claire did not say anything. She was listening with the particular quality of attention she had, which was the quality of someone who understood that when people started talking in the late-night quiet of a waiting room, what they needed was for the other person not to interrupt. I'm not complaining," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I would not trade any of this. Not any of it." He looked at the chair where Annalise had been sleeping. Sometimes I think about the fact that I am 41 years old and I have 3 kids and I am sitting in a hospital at 1 in the morning, and I think, who signs up for this? Who would look at this and think, yes, that's the life I want to walk into?" He paused. "No one marries a man with 3 kids," he said. Very quietly. Not bitterly. Just naming something he believed to be true. Claire looked at him. She looked at him the way she had looked at him from across the room at 11:12, fully, and without the performance of looking, just the actual thing itself. She thought about what she had seen when she came through that door. The stillness of a man who had not moved for the duration of 3 children's sleep so as not to disturb them. The hand on the boy's back. The automatic, unconscious language of consistent, uninterrupted love. She thought about the coffee she had brought, and about the fact that she had not done that for every parent in the waiting room, which was something she was aware of and which told her something about the difference between professional courtesy and what this was. She said, "They haven't met you." He looked at her. What? He said. The people who wouldn't sign up for this, she said. They haven't met you. A pause. They see 3 kids and they calculate it as a cost. But you're not presenting a cost. You're presenting, she stopped for a moment. Assembled the words carefully. You're showing what you are. And what you are is someone who has been the whole world for 3 people for 4 years, and who did it without losing himself, and who is sitting in a hospital waiting room at 1 in the morning still thinking about whether he's enough. That's not a liability. She said this quietly, the way she said important things. That's the whole answer to the question. He was very still. He looked at her for a long moment. You've only known me for 2 hours, he said. I've been a pediatric nurse for 14 years, she said. I can read a waiting room. Something moved across his face. It was not quite a smile and it was more than a smile, the expression of a person who has been carrying something in a certain way for a long time and has suddenly been offered a different way to hold it. What do you read in this one? He said. She looked around the waiting room. At the sleeping children in their various states. At the man who had been still for all of it. A good father, she said. Who needs to stop being surprised by that? He left in the morning with 3 children, one of whom was still slightly green around the edges and all of whom were quiet with the subdued quality of children who have been awake too long and are still recalibrating. He stopped at the desk. He asked the nurse at the desk if Claire Donahue was still on shift. She was not. She had gone off at 7. He stood at the desk for a moment. He took the small notepad from beside the sign-in sheet and wrote a note and left it with the nurse at the desk, who knew Claire and who said she would make sure she got it. The note said, "Thank you for the coffee and the blanket and the water and everything you didn't have to do. Thank you for what you said at 1 in the morning. I have been thinking about it since and I think I needed to hear it more than I knew. If you're ever inclined to have coffee with a man with 3 kids, I would like that very much. Joel." He left his number. He went home. She called on Thursday. He was at the kitchen table helping Theo with a book report when his phone rang, and he looked at the number and something in his chest did a thing he had not felt in a while, and he excused himself and went into the kitchen. "I got your note," she said. "I wasn't sure if that was too much," he said. "It wasn't," she said. A pause. "The man with 3 kids," he said. "Yes," she said. "You thought about it." "I did," she said. "I'm calling, aren't I?" He stood in the kitchen and looked out the window at the backyard where Miles was visible through the glass, conducting some private investigation of the garden with the focused purposefulness of a 3-year-old who has found something interesting. "Saturday," he said. "In the morning. I have a few hours before, it gets complicated in the afternoon." "Saturday morning works," she said. "There's a place on Clement Street," he said. "Good coffee. They have those big windows." "I know the one," she said. "Okay," he said. A pause. "Joel," she said. "Yeah. I meant what I said. At 1 in the morning. I want you to know that." He looked at Miles through the window. "I know," he said. "That's why I left the note." They met on a Saturday morning. She came in from the street with her hair down, which he had not seen before. The previous versions of her had been pulled back and practical, the hair of a person at work. She looked the same and different in the way people look when you see them outside the context where you met them, when they are simply themselves and not their role. He had gotten there first. He had a table by the big windows, as promised. She sat down. She looked at him in the daylight, which was different from fluorescent light, which was different from 1 in the morning, and he looked at her, and they had the particular moment that 2 people have when they are meeting each other properly for the first time after having already said something true to each other, which is the moment of deciding whether the true thing can bear the weight of the ordinary. It could. They talked for 3 hours. She told him about 14 years of pediatric nursing, about what it had given her and what it had cost her, about the way it made you see the world at the level where the real things happened, not the impressive things, not the curated things, but the actual things, the 3 in the morning things, the things people said when they had stopped managing their presentation. He told her about the braiding. She looked at him. "You taught yourself to braid," she said. "Annalisa's hair," he said. "There were videos." She was quiet for a moment. "Show me," she said. He looked at her. "I don't have, you have to have hair to, show me the technique," she said. "On the napkin." "Demonstrate." He looked at the napkin. He demonstrated, with 3 strips of the paper napkin, how he had learned to do a basic braid, and then how